causes of immigration. Is everybody excited? That's right. Is everybody ready to grab a shovel to bury the Monroe Doctrine? There we go.
All right. Thank you, Yamir, for the excellent job. So, in a way, I am really happy that we are the last panel because it's going to be an opportunity to reflect back on many of the things that were said in the previous panels. It would be an opportunity to try to round up some ideas. And right now we're going to hear from Yesenia and Carla and then Gustavo, three amazing leaders, which I'll be describing their amazing work in a minute, but we're very honored and happy to have them. And before they speak, I just want to say, just like we heard today, sanctions, fake free trade agreement, and all the other mechanisms that the US have established to keep Latin America against the wall are purposely planned, and they know the consequences that all of these actions have. The same happens with migration. It's been proven by academics from the US and across the world that forced migration across Latin America, it's mostly a consequence of neoliberalism. When the United States tried to redesign the market economy of the region, they knew and they projected, it's been documented, that there was going to be human displacement. They knew that the markets will scatter around the region, and as a consequence, people will move across the region. As the previous panel mentioned, one of the parts of the free trade agreement with Mexico was to stop subsidizing agricultural industries in Mexico, not in the US. So they always knew that campesinos and indigenous folks will be forced to move out of their communities. So migration is another form of displacement, another form of sanction, another form of fake promise of economic progress, but it's one of the most harshest, and the consequences of this bad planning are one of the harshest, saddest, and most terrible consequences that our region has played as a consequence of the Monroe Doctrine. And I'm just going to close by saying, we've learned today that it is proven that the Monroe Doctrine has failed over and over and over again, but not for the US. It has not failed for the purpose of the US. So it is not going to stop just because we proved them wrong, but because we break free in Latin America, because we stop cooperating, collaborating with these policies of death as they were mentioned. And we'll say it at the end, but when our countries break free from the Monroe Doctrine, that day the US will be on its own and will be forced to reflect and ask for help to the countries in the region, because the main reason why the Monroe Doctrine is in place is because the US needs our labor, our resources, our land, and by itself, it's not the same country that is right now. Please let me welcome Yesenia Portillo. Please give us a big round of applause, please. Let me just read a little bit about her very quickly. Yesenia is the program director at CISPES, the Committee Solidarity with the People of El Salvador. In her role, Yesenia has supported coalition building and strategic campaigns to raise awareness and push back against the most harmful impact of U.S. policy in Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. In 2022, she helped lead a delegation of progressive members of Congress to Central America to learn from grassroots groups about the consequences of the militarized and corporate-driven solutions that drive U.S. policy in the region, including through the Biden-Harris plan for Central America. Please.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Greg. So I have some slides. Yay. So yeah, first of all, thank you, everyone, for being here. It's really an honor to be here, especially with Carla and Gustavo. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Biden-Harris program to supposedly address the root causes of migration first. So the Biden-Harris campaign platform on immigration included a focus on addressing the root causes of migration from Central America, particularly from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, which was echoed in the U.S. Citizenship Act proposed by Democrats in February 2021, shortly after Biden took office. After the proposed legislation sweeping pro-immigrant elements were watered down and mostly died in Congress, the elements related to addressing the root causes of migration made up the White House's U.S. strategy for addressing the root causes of migration, announced and published in July 2021. This policy framework has seen more than $1 billion in development aid from the U.S. State Department via USAID and other programs, and the creation of the 501c3 Partnership for Central America, with over $4 billion committed from the private sector. The next slide. A couple of years prior, as yet another mass migration crisis moment hit U.S. mainstream media headlines in the form of caravans of people banding together in numbers larger than ever to migrate through Guatemala and Mexico, I noticed a shift in the way the mainstream media was talking about migration from the region. At first, it seemed like finally an acknowledgement of the role that the U.S. has played in the conditions that continue to lead to mass forced displacement. A closer look makes it clear, however, that these conversations fall short. In the bottom right is a screen grab, I guess, of a 5-minute clip from Samantha Bee's full frontal segment, which aired in June of 2019. She focuses on El Salvador and describes the billions that the US spent there in the 80s to fight communism. She even talks about the major role that tough on crime policies of the 90s in Los Angeles and Bill Clinton's immigration reform played in the birth and expansion of MS-13, the transnational gang that became the major scapegoat against migrants under Trump. In the end, however, Samantha Bee's segment made it seem as though Salvadorans are only migrating because of gangs, mentioning nothing about more contemporary US police and military security financing in the region or the impacts of current US economic policies towards El Salvador. I find it interesting also that even though at the time a large portion of the migrants in these caravans were actually fleeing Honduras, the focus of the segment was El Salvador in the 80s, rather than the ongoing political support for the coup government and narco dictatorship in Honduras that continued on from when President Obama and Vice President Biden were in office. The other image is from a 10-minute MSNBC segment where the speakers react to a press conference held by Vice President Harris in Mexico City after receiving major backlash for telling migrants in Guatemala do not come. In the press conference, the Vice President explained some of the work she's been doing within the framework of the US strategy for Central America. During the segment, host Joy-Ann Reid does a really important job of acknowledging the long history of US profit-driven destabilization in Central America and its deep impacts, mentioning the United Fruit Company and the US-backed coup against Jacobo Arbenz in Guatemala, for example. While an acknowledgement of the history of the exploitative nature of the US relationship towards Central America is necessary, I'm sad to report that the analysis in this segment also assumes that this relationship is in the past. After several minutes dedicated to explaining how, quote, the United States used much of Central America as essentially a giant plantation, the speakers ultimately go on to say that the US needs to now fix the economy, the instability, and the corruption there, applauding the Vice President for her efforts And remember, this is just a day after the scandal surrounding her do not come warning to migrants. Congressman Espiot says in the interview, I think we have to take a deep dive to find the root causes. Here, her going there is taking the first step, take a deep dive and find out what must be done to build public-private partnerships. Maria Hinojosa says, I'm very happy to hear that there is going to be such an extraordinary investment. And Joyanne Reed, despite her acknowledgement that the quote, the deep corruption in the region is in part because of our policies, closes by applauding the anti-corruption elements of the plan. Ultimately, what is happening here is a co-signing of the current White House strategy and a discussion of it that assumes there's something novel about it. Today, US foreign policy towards the so-called Northern Triangle is increasingly discussed as a necessary part of the plan. Oh, sorry, if you can move on to the next slide. For curbing migration, what we've been hearing from Democrats is that in order to address the issues of massive flow of migrants to the US's southern border, the US must solve the root causes of why people are fleeing. This is an appropriation of the demands coming from popular social movements in the region and grassroots solidarity organizations in the US, which have for decades denounced the destabilizing role of US intervention. So if you look at the plan, it identifies these things as the major root causes of migration from the region: corruption, violence, trafficking, and poverty. And then if we can go to the next slide. So let's look at the strategy for addressing poverty with some highlights here. Promote investment enabling reforms, address structural impediments to investment, and facilitate greater private sector participation, partner with the private sector, partner with international financial institutions and multilateral development banks. So does this look like something novel to us? Okay, so next slide. How much time do I have? I might skip this one. Well, anyway, so it's within this framework. Ooh. Okay, it's within this framework that the Vice President makes her call to action to the private sector to deepen investment in Central America, and an NGO made up of the top leadership of corporations like Nestle, or Nescafe rather, Microsoft, Pepsi, and MasterCard is created. It's described as a coalition of private sector organizations driving practical solutions to advance economic opportunity, address urgent climate, education, and health challenges, and promote long-term investment in Central America. Next slide. The strategy for addressing violence and trafficking can be summed up with these highlights: professionalize security forces, improve civilian policing, counter organized crime, increase capacity of law enforcement and other security forces. And now also it's important that while this strategy claims to be aimed at addressing the root causes of poverty and violence, or the root causes such as poverty and violence, it's also explicitly talked about as necessary for curbing China's economic influence. Next slide. So the next few slides is a timeline of US foreign policy towards Central America since the Monroe Doctrine. It is informed heavily by Aviva Chomsky's excellent article, The Root Causes of Migration from Central America, the US. The first slide is a little more reflective of the nature of the article, and that it doesn't just look at the policy frameworks towards the region, but also the way they were implemented. Starting here with the Monroe Doctrine in 1823, reinforced in 1905 by the Roosevelt Corollary. Next slide. For the next couple of slides, I included just the policy frameworks and the names of where they came from. The Alliance for Progress under Kennedy, which Francesca mentioned, the Santa Fe docs and Kissinger reports that informed Reagan-era policy and really post-Reagan-era policy. And I'm really gonna plug the Aviva Chomsky article here again, because she provides crucial insight on the impacts of these policies, and hint they led to worker disenfranchisement and increased mass displacement. And she also provides some insight as to how the workers and negatively impacted communities of Central America responded. And so next slide. Taking us into the 2000s, we have CAFTA and billions of dollars of military and security financing through the Merida Initiative, the Central American Regional Security Initiative, or CARSI, and I think Plan Frontera Sur should go here as well. All policies to promote a favorable climate for the private sector and to secure police and military control over the region for border enforcement and to supposedly combat organized crime. The Obama era also heavily promotes private-public partnerships, and the Alliance for Prosperity included hundreds of millions of dollars for international narcotics and law enforcement. This policy was also supposedly in response to what's known as the child migrant crisis and claimed to be the answer to addressing the reasons why people continue to flee the region. The Biden-Harris strategy operates under similar frameworks and promotes similar solutions. And again, I'll close this by naming that a root cause analysis is something that comes from the radical left, and it's being co-opted in order to justify policies that are a mere continuation of foreign policy frameworks towards the region that are at least 2 centuries old now if we start with the Monroe Doctrine. Thank you. The next slide. Of course, we know that resistance to the U.S. economic model is long-standing in Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, while U.S. development aid is based on a logic that it will supposedly improve things like systems of healthcare, education, electricity, and water in Central America. We know that what it actually promotes first and foremost are privatization schemes, bringing in private corporations to run these essential human goods and services under the logic that corporate management will make them more efficient, or that exploitative industries like mining corporations will create more jobs. But we know that corporations increase their profits by any means necessary to the detriment of consumers, workers, and the environment. In El Salvador in the 1990s, in the decade following the signing of the 1992 peace accords, over 30 state institutions were privatized, including national banks, electricity, and telecommunications. In the early 2000s, Salvadorans organized mass resistance against the Central American Free Trade Agreement and against efforts to privatize the healthcare system there, knowing full well the negative impacts that these policies had in the previous decade. 2 historic struggles that I have had the opportunity to learn about through my work with CISPES are the fights against water privatization and against metallic mining in El Salvador, which is also ultimately a water defense issue. In 2010, I participated in the Radical Roots delegation, which was CISPES's first delegation to El Salvador for the Salvadoran diaspora. At the time, El Salvador was being sued under CAFTA after communities successfully organized to pressure the Salvadoran government to temporarily halt mining, a struggle that led to a historic victory in 2017 when it became the first and only country in the world to ban metallic mining. In 2018, mass protests in El Salvador to push back against emboldened right-wing efforts to pass a national water privatizing law. When that was happening, I learned more about that history, including that in 2007, the right-wing government of Antonio Saca was promoting a water privatization plan using the language of decentralization, which was a concerted effort by the Inter-American Development Bank, providing loans to the government for the promotion of private sector participation, using specialized consultants to give support and financial advice to the government towards the effective organization of private sector participation schemes. Water defense activists mobilizing against Saca's water privatization were the first to be arrested under the 2007 anti-terrorism law, which shouldn't come as a surprise since it's the same tactics used in all territories with major US influence and increasingly within US colonial borders as well. A little over a year ago, CISPES had the opportunity to work with other anti-imperialist international solidarity groups like Witness for Peace, folks from the Honduras Solidarity Network, School of the Americas Watch, and the Network in Solidarity with Guatemala to coordinate a delegation to Guatemala and Honduras, where I witnessed and learned, with progressive congressional representatives, did I say that? Where I witnessed and learned about resistance to several different mining projects, many that receive financing from the Inter-American Development Bank or the World Bank, or that depend heavily on the corruption of the Juan Orlando Hernandez government, that, for example, in Huapinol, gave land concessions in national reserves illegally to some of the richest men for open-air mining. This under a government that, despite the US government's stated concerns over corruption, received unconditional political support and military and police financing. Some of the most devastating moments of the delegation were meeting with communities in resistance who had experienced deadly police attacks while putting their lives on the line to defend their rivers, and a mother in Xinca territory that detailed her sadness and fear of her children making the decision to migrate because the Escobal mine had made life unlivable for them, and not knowing if her children would survive the journey. Okay. So I'm gonna spend the last supposedly 1 minute I have to discuss the fascistic and dictatorial government of Nayib Bukele in El Salvador. Most known to many, oh, we can change to the next slide. Most known to many for making El Salvador the first country to make Bitcoin a legal tender, a policy that, like everything else about the government, was nothing more but a major publicity stunt and a mechanism for corruption. Most recently known for his war on gangs, which has suspended some of the most basic constitutional protections of all Salvadorans and has led to the arrest of over 70,000 people in just a little over a year. And mainstream headlines claim that Bukele has eliminated gangs in El Salvador. But behind the spectacle of Bukele's mega prison lies mass human rights atrocities and a systemic attack against his opposition, particularly against the left and against organized communities in El Salvador. El Salvador's prisons are 300% over capacity, and tens of thousands of people from El Salvador's most marginalized communities have been arbitrarily arrested and held in months on end of pretrial detention in torturous and deadly conditions, with hundreds already dead as a result of their imprisonment, many with signs of violent death and reports of mass torture. The Bukele administration rose to power by co-opting the frustration that Salvadorans felt from the negative consequences of the neoliberal economic model. Thank you. I'm almost done. We cannot understand Bukele's rise to power in El Salvador without the longer context of US military and security financing. While Samantha B. mentioned how MS-13 was birthed, she did not discuss the US role in maintaining those conditions, even through the present day, with billions of dollars for police and military training that limited the response to gangs to punitive policing, a tactic Bukele is using in its most extreme form, while doing business with organized crime and arresting union leaders, vocal opponents. And I have to mention our comrades from the historic community of Santa Marta, who led that struggle that secured El Salvador's anti-mining ban, which Bukele intends to reverse and are now under arrest in pretrial, in an automatic 6-month pretrial detention in deadly conditions. The silence of the US Embassy and the State Department, along with ongoing military and security financing, under the excuse of the war on drugs and border enforcement, exposes the hypocrisy of US foreign policy that is supposedly based on fighting corruption, defending human rights, and spreading democracy. And so I'll just close by saying, you know, Bukele has an extremely large publicity apparatus, and a lot of people, even on the left, gave him a lot of benefit of the doubt, but he's clearly promoting the interests of the global elite via police and military repression. And I welcome everyone to join CISPES and the Salvadoran organized communities in denouncing what's happening there and in denouncing US complicity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yesenia. Very informative and moving presentation that reminds us that what's happening at the border, Mexico-US border, it's not an spontaneous crisis. It's provoked, made and planned by the United States with the complicity of corrupt governments across our countries. And it takes us to change that. Since NAFTA was signed in the case of Mexico, over 3 million people have crossed the border from Mexico and the US. And if we add Central America could be up to 5 million people. And if we add folks that are coming from Haiti and South America and from Africa and other continents through Mexico these days, it's more than that. It's millions of people who have been displaced as a consequence of these policies that Yesenia just presented. And to continue this reflection, I want to welcome our sister Carla Garcia. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much. Carla Garcia is the International Relations Coordinator at OFRANE. She came to the United States in 2013 and works with the Garifuna communities in New York. She has a history of activism and participation in civic action for over 20 years and serves as representative of culture at the national and international level of the Ballet Nacional Folclórico Garifuna. So she's also the co-facilitator for the Afro-Descendant platform that came out of the Peace Summit. Welcome, warrior and leader, Carla Garcia.
Thank you, Marco. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. And thank you for letting me explain to you our vision as Garifuna community about immigration. I'm going to use Spanglish. That's why I have her here with me. She's going to help me, give me assistance in moments because my English is very fundamental, very limited too. Thank you. Yeah, this part is practice. You don't pay attention of this part. So let me start with a reflection. I want to call my ancestors and our ancestors to occupy this space and make us feel their energy and listen them what they really want from us in the earth, not only in our countries or in the United States. People here witnesses what happened this morning. And we need to understand that everything is based in energy. And the pain, the hardness, the forgiveness, the war, the blood, also can control energies and manifest in front of us, even if we don't understand that this is some energy coming through our eyes to make us maybe think more about what is happening. I have a doubt with our ancestors, the ancestors of the world. Do you believe that it's a good idea go to Egypt, right? To remove bodies from people who lives 300, 500, 5,000 years ago? Or is a good idea go to Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, and profound the cemeteries? And what will happen in 5,000 years? They will come to our bodies, for our bodies. Believe in that. And if everything is energy, for example, the slavery that we are trying to talk about slavery like something that happened, but it doesn't happen to us. Saying this because I know I just have 15 minutes. I wanna leave this question in the air. If somebody comes to you with a problem to be solved in a language that you don't understand, with rules that are not your rules, how are you going to do to solve that problem? I can tell about the indigenous and Black communities in St. Vincent in the 1600s when the colonizers, the people who discover America, came to the islands. And they saw these people looking maybe different, but people, and they tell them, you can live there. But these people said that they discover and they become the owners of the land. We can say in the way that we learn in the universities, at school, or in this new era, that the indigenous community own the land, own the spaces. We're the owners, right? But in our cosmovision, we don't own anything. Everything is to be shared with others. This is the nonsense that we found in the history of every community, the history of every poor population. I want to talk about what happened and what I know happened with the Garifuna community in 2013 when they started to come to the United States in big groups. Nobody called them at that time. Nobody said that it was a caravan. But it is the moment when everything started. People went in our communities in Honduras, waiting for mothers and child and young people going to the school or coming out from school, going back home, and told them, you can come to the United States. Right now, there's a law that if you, as a mother, have a child and you enroll your child at school, the Obama law will protect you. Come to the United States. And this is the way that it happened. In San Pedro Sula, there were a lot of people with money to borrow, to loan them the money that they will need to come to the border. Nothing happened to those group of immigrants in the way coming to the United States. Nothing. No matters, no nothing appearing in front of them to maybe cut the dream. As soon as they arrive with the coyotes to the south border, they didn't came into the United States without a permission because the police border, went to them, took them, and put it inside of the United States. But that time, a lot of young people who already graduate from the legal field didn't have jobs. Oh, people is coming through the border. This is the good moment to give jobs to this new generation of lawyers. At the same time, the immigration court was having less and less and less cases. A big opportunity to fill back the court and to give job to more people to occupy those positions. There was a project in where our women, the women of the Garifuna community, were pushed to accept voluntary, signing documentation in English, saying that they were signing voluntarily to be part of the GPS monitoring process. And when they arrive, for example, to New York, 3 or 4 days, because if they did not accept this voluntary project, they were supposed to continue in a jail in the border. So the way to go out and meet their families, it was signing this voluntary documentation. So 5 days later, an appointment in the court. They saw the judge, and the judge sent them downstairs at the Federal Plaza building to get the ankle brace, the ankle monitor. And this company that is private and still private was using the Federal Plaza building to put those ankle braces in the people, to know and monitor what is the bad consequence in each person getting an ankle brace. Now the ankle brace is a big business after the test in the Garifuna community and the Garifuna women's. So why I'm telling this part to you? Because we know and we knew and we tell the community they are removing the people from our communities because they want to own our land. But at the same time, these people must produce because they don't speak English. They will not have a legal documentation. They will not start working immediately. So they were producing for this country. And at the moment that they arrived to the border, they started to produce, giving jobs to other people in this country. And nobody is recognizing that. But at the same time, our communities in where Orphanet is fighting to continue holding and having the land started to have less people, especially women in the reproductive state, child, and young people. If you move your next generation to another country to learn a different culture, you will not have enough to hold the land to continue having the fight. And this is what is happening right now in Honduras. The communities are trying to resist all these projects, but there's not enough young people to fight for their land. What is happening here? Why they don't go back? Because they still like in a migratory limbo. They go to the court, they just see that they still here and they are in good shape, and the judge gave to them a letter to return in 2 or 5 years. Consent to get a permission to work, and that's it. Not legal documentations, no nothing, so they cannot go back to Honduras, but they don't have a legal status here. And it's happening since 2013. So why they did this? Do you remember the North Triangle Project involving Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador? The second big caravan of migration came from the indigenous community of Guatemala, and the third one from El Salvador. Oh, wow. That's a coincidence, right? This is exactly what all this day I listen people discussing, how intentionally they are harming us, they are harming our communities and displacing us to get the resources, the land, etc., etc. What is the problem right now? Honduras have a new president, Miss Xiomara Castro. But Honduras doesn't have a state. And right now, there's a big movement to remove Xiomara Castro Zelaya from the presidency. And United States, who support Juan Orlando Hernandez for 13 years, because he was twice president, but he was support before from the United States, was making the job to have the country in the moment that we have now. My concern, because I know I have just 2 minutes, and there's a lot of things that we can say about this. My concern is we still trying to solve a problem in a different language, because the Garifuna community, as the indigenous community, is never going to see other person as something different or something material that we can get any benefit. Thank you. We're going to see other people, as us. So we still involved in a problem that we don't know how to solve. That's why we need the people who live in the United States, who born in the United States, who understand United States to help solve that part of the problem. We're going to continue fighting for our life, fighting for our communities. But we need you as part of our community, not as part of the United States community, as part of the world community, to fight together. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla. We heard from Yesenia first how the government of the United States publicly presents a project. Then we heard from Carla what in the reality it's happening. What is the other plan? What's the other alliance for prosperity, right? Which is intentionally pushing people out of their communities, taking their resources while forcing them to work in a legal limbo in the United States. Let's welcome our last panelist. Please, a warm applause for Gustavo Torres, please. Gustavo Torres, Executive Director at CASA, the largest Latino and immigrant organization in the Mid-Atlantic. Gustavo came to the U.S. due to the political and economic unrest in his country of origin, Colombia. He joined CASA staff as a community organizer and became the executive director in 1994. And under his leadership, CASA has grown from a small service organization to an organization of staff nearly of 150 people and a membership of over 97,000 people, which operates in multiple states. It's an honor to have you here with us, Gustavo. Thank you. You have 10 minutes.
10 minutes, why? Okay, let me see if I can summarize. Let me stand and
Yes.
buenas tardes. And thank you very much. I just want to share with you our vision and to see if we can, because what I understand that we are here is to try to find the best potential U.S. policy for Latin America. So what I'm going to share with you today is some ideas that we have, to brainstorm with you, and we need you to be able to make sure that we are going to accomplish that. First of all, I want to invite all of you, May 1st, International Worker Day. We are going to have a rally in support of the immigrant community in front of the White House. Please join us. Please join us at noon. It's so very important. The only way how we are going to accomplish whatever I'm going to share with you is because we need to be united. It's the only way how we are going to accomplish that. So please join us one more time. International Worker Day, noon in front of the White House. And let me tell you what we believe. We believe that immigration policies must be grounded in racial, economic, and gender equity and justice. That's simple. The U.S. policy right now is racist. We know that. So we are proposing to address this issue with 5 different freedoms to the U.S. government, to you, and to all of us, to make sure that we fight for those freedoms. And let me tell you very quickly about the 5 freedoms that we believe that are very important to change the U.S. policy related with immigration, to make sure that we have a different perspective and different world. Because what you see right over here and what our sister shared is totally unacceptable. That is what we face all the time. We have 140,000 members, mostly in the Washington metro area, but also all around the country. And they face the same challenges that you heard from our sisters. So we are proposing five freedoms. And let me start it with the first one. The first one is the freedom to transform. Let me describe to you what happened and how our community have been punished. When one of our members commit any crime, they don't qualify for anything in terms of immigration. Nothing, zero, because you are criminal forever, even that you pay for what you did. So we believe that people can transform, and we believe that people have the right to a second chance. We believe that when people pay whatever they did, they have the opportunity to receive any immigration policy assistance. Because right now they don't have any opportunities at all. So that is the first one. The second one, the second freedom, is that we believe the freedom to stay in our countries if we want it. If we don't want to migrate, we want to stay in our countries because we love our countries. Actually, I'm here not because I want to be here. I'm here because the reality in my country, I'm from Colombia. So the freedom to stay is so very, very important. Number 3 freedom is the freedom to move. Yes, if you want to migrate from your country to here or to wherever you want to, you need to have this freedom. That is the minimum. I mean, remember, with all of these businesses, corporations, and all of that, they move to wherever they want, right? Why human beings cannot have the same freedom? So that is our number 3 one. And we want to have that conversation with all of you, but also with the US government. Because that is the way how we change that policies. Number 4, the freedom to work with dignity, with rights. Right now, people who are undocumented, you know what right they have? No rights. So they have the right to work with dignity, to unionize, to create coups, to do whatever they wanted. It's so very, very important. So that is number 4. And number 5, freedom to thrive, wherever you are, to create a dignity for you and your family and your community, to make sure that you have the right to water, clean water, food, to make sure that you have the opportunity to have a space for you to live with dignity. That is our 5 freedom and principles that I want to share with all of you, but also with the government, or the US government. And we believe that it's very important that we work together to accomplish that. Because yes, we know that the system is broke. Yes, we know that we need comprehensive immigration reform now for the 11 million people who are undocumented in this country. We believe that it's very important to recognize that the immigration system is broke and is racist. We know that. But we need to find solutions to address that. And together we can find solutions. We need to work together to make sure that we not only convince but force the US to change those policies, because those policies are totally unacceptable. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, 3 amazing warriors here at the table, sharing their thoughts, ideas, their reflections, and inspiring us to get up and fight. I don't know how we did it, but we did it. It's 4:52, and we're going to get ready for the closing remarks from our very 3 special leaders. I don't think we're going to have a break. We're going to go straight into it, right? Yes. Okay, we're going to go straight into it. And let me just close by saying that in the face of 200 years of Monroe Doctrine, it is up to us, the people in the region, to change that reality. The change is not going to come because one day President Biden wakes up and says, I think this is not working. I received sufficient evidence that the Monroe Doctrine is hurting people. That's not where things are going to change. It's going to come out of our hands, our thoughts, our coming together, resisting, building communities, building solidarity, and staying away from collaborating with any of this perverted expressions of oppression, of contemporary oppression. Hundreds of people, including this in this forum, are coming together across the region to say enough is enough. Learn more about next steps on Code Pink, learn more about the Peace Summit, and more upcoming efforts. Next year, Mexico and the US will have presidential elections, both countries, and it's a unique opportunity to speak with one voice. It's now or never. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great job, Marco. Great panel. Thank you all for being here. And now we are going to have our closing remarks from two wonderful women. And we're going to start with our sister Claudia de la Cruz, who is the co-executive director of the People's Forum. Has anybody here been to the People's Forum in New York City? It is amazing. It is our People's Forum, and it's such a great model. She was born in the South Bronx to immigrant parents from the Dominican Republic. She is a popular educator, community organizer, and theologian. Wow. For 20 years, she's been committed to movement building and has actively participated in collective grassroots spaces, particularly in the communities of Washington Heights and South Bronx. So let's give it up for Claudia de la Cruz.
Well, while folks figure out the slide situation, I do want to thank, and I always do, thank the Bolivarian Revolution for its commitment to the South Bronx. It did very much the same thing that they did for the indigenous nations, the tribes that Comrade Nick Estes was talking about. And we had the pleasure of receiving our Comandante Chavez there in 2005. And so just want to extend my gratitude to the Venezuelan people, because it is their effort that allowed us to be able to have heat in the winters. This has been an amazing event. I want to thank the organizers. Shout out to Code Pink. I have the privilege of being a board member, and I'm very honored and privileged to be part of that collective of warriors. Everything that has been touched on by the amazing list of panelists who have presented today brings to mind the words of Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. He spoke these words in 1967 in one of his most important speeches, speech that is barely ever kind of taught to us in school, and is the Beyond Vietnam speech, when he told us that the United States of America is the greatest purveyor of violence in the world. This country was built on slavery, hostility, dominance, violence, rape, coups, military interventions, dictatorships, unilateral coercive measures or sanctions, blockades. It has been built on the dismemberment of humanity and the planet. That is the foundation of the United States of America. And I refuse to call the United States of America, America, because America is a goddamn continent. I think it's important to raise that the globalization of poverty, misery, suffering, the blood and tears, the underdevelopment of the global South has been the down payment for U.S. imperialism. As the presenters shared in the panel on economy, the economic base, the capitalist system, is a predatory one. Its very nature is to pillage, to extract, to violate. So as we leave this forum, we must be clear that in order to bury 200 years of the Monroe Doctrine, we need to dismantle the very system that has produced and maintained it. And it is good for us to be in solidarity with our comrades all over the world. It is good for us to build international projects. But you know what would be better? Do you know what would be better? What? For the US to take the responsibility of building its own revolution. US imperialism, the global manifestation of US capitalism, is a cancer. It is the most dangerous pandemic to have plagued the planet, one that must be fought and destroyed if we are to save humanity. That is what is at stake. Capitalism needs to use force to sustain itself, and it also needs to spread fears, to lie, and to manipulate. Amongst the many lies that we've been sold, not only in this country but around the world, is that it is easier for the end of the world to arrive than for capitalism to end. And that is the biggest lie that capitalism has sold to us. It has told us that capitalism is eternal, this is the way things are, that at best, all we can do is reform capitalism. We have been told that imperialism cannot be defeated, and that it is only through imperialist wars and interventions that we gain security and stability. The ruling class has consistently worked to terrorize and lie to us into submission and sink us into hopelessness. And all we need to do is look into history to find out that it is possible to bring down empires. All empires in history have fallen, but they do not fall on their own volition. They do not fall because they grow a consciousness. They do not grow a consciousness. If we have been listening, we know that the US imperialism has no morals, has no ethics, has no consciousness. Empires fall when the masses of the majority of people, the poor and working class, grow a conscience. When we see ourselves and live in the future, connected to the lives and the future of our sisters and brothers, those who fight imperialism every day, those living in Cuba under a blockade for over 60 years, and building its revolution. Those living in Venezuela, resisting attacks since the conception of its revolution, and deepening its revolution with people's democracy. Fidel Castro said, and I will raise his name wherever I go. Fidel Castro said, there is very little that those who have chained humanity can teach us. Only those who have broken their chains can teach us. We need to look not into Latin America and the Caribbean as a charity case, as something that we just need to give to. People have resisted for 200 years and beyond. People have learned to live and exist with dignity. That is more than the people from the United States can say. We have a lot to learn from Latin America, the Caribbean, and the global South. The Haitian people have had to pay for being the first free black nation in this hemisphere. Very few people remember Haiti. We must remember Haiti. So when we talk about burying 200 years of the Monroe Doctrine, let us remember our responsibility as people living in the belly of the beast. We are the ones to dismantle this monster. We are the ones to bury the corpse of imperialism, because it will not die from age. It will reproduce itself.
If we go back to history, we know the levels of crises that capitalism and imperialism had faced. And they always find a way to recreate themselves. The latest project was the neoliberalist project. We are in the crossroads of history. At this very moment, we are in the crossroads of history. There is a geopolitical fight that's being fought. And it is up to us, the people in the United States of America, those of us who are part of the 160 million people who are living in poverty or below the poverty line, to grow a consciousness. Do you know what that consciousness is? My dear friend Marx called it a class consciousness, where we understand ourselves as part of the international community of working class people, where we are able to understand that we have way more in relationship to the global South working class than we do to the government that does not represent us. When we're able to accept that, and we can convincingly share that with others, we are very, very much few steps ahead to be able to build the change that needs to be changed here. We cannot be part of the lie and tell people that there's any reform that could be made within a capitalist system that'll actually take us where we need to go. So if we wanna bury this death machine, we gotta study this dead machine. But we must learn from those who have broken their chains. Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much, Claudia. Learn from those who have broken their chains. And one of the really beautiful things that we have done here today is weaving in and out and recognizing the connection between our indigenous sisters and brothers throughout the Americas, including here in the United States. And that's why I'm really pleased to introduce Judy Talagon, who is a Chumash and Filipina land protector from the Santa Ynez Band of Chumash Indians. She is the daughter of farm workers and immigrant leaders who grew up among Mexican and Filipino communities in California. She is a longtime activist. I knew her when she took part in shutting down of the quincentennial celebration of the myth of discovery of Christopher Columbus. And she is an organizer with California Indians for Cultural and Environmental Protection. Her work is based on very clear principles, creating a culture of resistance, standing in solidarity with activists from the entire hemisphere and the world, and building up women-led, indigenous, land-back movements next to and in solidarity with Black, AAPI, and Latinx communities. So thank you so much, Judy, for being with us.
Thank you for welcoming me so lovingly. I have allergies, so I'm struggling. Yes, I will. So, the question is, what is next? Yeah? And so I want to say that I have the beautiful blessing at this time to participate and find the glory of this event in community, that we see each other. We know each other as a collective, as a human collective, in struggle and finding our indoctrination, locating it, and healing. Yeah? So I am in collaboration now to the what is next, and that is 30 research scholars from out of Berkeley, California, out of UC Berkeley, with Professor Moreno and the Latinx Resource Center. And our curricula is greatly based and framed on abolition. And we are going to reintroduce new characterizations to abuse. But what really brought me back to this, and I think that a lot of us are returning with great, energy to what is next. What really brought me back is Nick Estes and the collective that authored the Red Deal. And that very action. Yes, thank you, yes. Melanie Yazzie, I think upwards to over 10 contributors, okay? So that in of itself is an example of what we need to do in the North. Re-educate, recapture our memory, our collective memory as the collective. So one of the things that we've done, I'm going to be very sort of join you into participation today. Do you have a pledge card on you? And if you have, yes. Okay. So in the meanwhile, while they're pledging, I'm going to tell that story. So every Friday, we're getting ready to host a People's Tribunal, greatly influenced by the work that we did in '92, because we hosted a People's Tribunal holding the United States on trial for crimes against humanity. Greatly to do with the agenda today. What grew out of today, I will just assert that now with my Dramamine, is that I was able to pencil in a date in February with Nicaragua, okay, to get our scholarship in line with what they're about to do down there, with the return of land to the African indigenous communities, the matriarchy, and we are doing that here, rematriating land. Why not begin to expand that knowledge and that experience in the North? That is the driving theme, is that we need to really educate the North. We have no participation in the oppression in the South. Our participation is as indoctrinated, U.S. citizens or residents of this particular North. Again, it was the border violence that brought me forth, and witnessing at the border and knowing that the wildfire that can be created by us who reside in the North, who are tribally associated, who have that quote unquote, all of these sort of important things to Americans, recognition, federal, status, enrollment, but the blood quantum, those things have never been of any real true consequence to us because we're still here. And if they had, we would have joined, certain extermination. So let's get that card. Here we go. I would love to hear us read this together, starting with I will do pledge card, and then let's say, there you go. Pledge to resist imperialist policies, to undermine peace in America, knowing that injustices continue to be perpetuated. I commit to organizing people power in order to stop militarization, extraction, forms of colonial domination.
In so doing, I pledge to create inclusive forms of solidarity towards our common goal of peace in the hemisphere.
Thank you so much. And as we wrap up here, I want to bring forward two women who've been working nonstop for a long time now. Where is Michelle Elder and Samantha Weary? Samantha, come up front. And Olivia, you should come up too.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for everyone who has stayed throughout this whole day. It's been such an amazing experience to be here sharing with all of you and to be learning from so many great thinkers who joined us today. And I just want to recognize the work that, not just me and Michelle put into this forum, but all the endorsing organizations, the steering committee, Greg, Oscar. There are so many amazing people that have contributed to making this policy forum what it is and what it has become. So yeah, and of course Michelle has done such an amazing work. She created the website and just all the little details and everything. And of course Angela and Fred, who also created the program and brought so many amazing ideas to the floor and made it so that it would be a more inclusive forum. So I just want to give a special shout out to everyone who
And these wonderful women have an idea that this is the beginning of other types of gatherings like this. And since this was done in such a communal way, we are looking for other organizations that will come forward and say, we want to do something, whether it's bringing in all these issues or more specific, and then we want to all get behind that group and work with them, and it could be anywhere in this country. So we look forward to talking to you about the next forum and the next forum so that we keep going on. And of course, there's many, many other ways that we want to keep working together. We want to make sure that we have a way to work with each of the groups in their what they're working on. And just to even recognize that today there's people who are at a protest around Bukele in El Salvador. Yeah. There's our wonderful sisters who have been working for freedom for Pedro Castillo in Peru and for back to constitutional rule. We have fabulous people who have been working to get Cuba off the state-sponsored terrorism list. We have people who want to free Alex Saab and get the sanctions on Venezuela lifted and the $3 billion that belongs to the Venezuelan people back to the Venezuelan people that's being held, stolen from them. We've talked about so many wonderful issues. We also want to make sure you know that when you talk about the Americas, you have to talk about culture, because there's so much inspiring, wonderful culture throughout the Americas. And that's why it's important that we gather together this evening at Busboys and Poets to hear from our cultural artists. And that is at the 14th and V, Busboys and Poets, this evening, starting at 7 p.m.
Go from here.
We're going to go from here. And we also want to recognize that while we've been learning from these great panelists and speakers, we've also been watching the beautiful art that's been created by our friend Lulo here. So stand up, Lulo, so we can recognize you. And please don't leave without taking a look at this wonderful artistic rendition of what we've been talking about today. Yes. Decolonize. It's even got the Malvinas in there for anybody who... So we've got, we also want to say that there is a rally for Julian Assange that's happening on World Press Freedom Day. That's on Wednesday, May 3rd, 12 to 2 at the Department of Justice, and we'll march to the National Press Club. And of course, there is the event happening this evening of the White House Correspondents' Dinner. If anyone wants to go by there and join the people who will be blockading outside, calling for real movement on the climate crisis.
Thank you.
So we've had a wonderful, wonderful time together today. And I've heard people mention twice already how under Hugo Chavez, there were these programs that brought not only heating oil, but really solidarity, north-south, south-north. And so I want to end just by remembering a time that I was in Venezuela when Hugo Chavez was addressing this mass auditorium of people, and he got them all fired up against the empire. Some of you might remember when he went to the United Nations and he talked about George Bush smelling like sulfur. He was the devil. So he was talking about George Bush and the devil and those devils up in the north. And here we were, a group of people from the north that were sitting right there, and we started feeling like, oh, you know, let's kind of be invisible here. And he points to us. And he says, but here are the people of Martin Luther King. And when we liberate ourselves from this empire, from the south, that we're going to fight to liberate ourselves, and we are working together with the people in the north who are trying to liberate themselves, we will be liberated in the global south, and we will liberate the people of Martin Luther King. So get up, and he acknowledged all of us, and we all had a great clap to understand that this liberation is coming up from the south, but it's boiling inside the empire right here in the entrañas del imperio in Washington, D.C. So we have so much global solidarity. I've been working on Ukraine, and every time I get really depressed about the war, I start reading about Latin America. So it's inspiring, it's wonderful. We know a lot of you have roots in Latin America, and we thank you so much for carrying those roots here with you today. And as we move forward, let us move forward. Giving donations. Because this took a lot of money to put on. We will have donation baskets as you leave, or up here as well, if you can put something into there. And we would like your photos. Oh, a group photo. And we have one more important person to thank here. Don't move, Tigberry. We want to thank Tig for all the work in putting the logistics of this together for the last few days, working so hard. And we're going to do, where are we going to do the group photo? Yeah. So we're going to do a group photo here, right over here. And we're going to organize this with the tall people in the back, so we know that that includes Nick Estes and Greg and Leo, tall people in the back, shorter ones in front. But let's give one more applause to everybody who worked so hard to make this day possible. El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. El people united will never be defeated. The people united will never be defeated. Ni un paso atrás. Venceremos. Venceremos, pero varios pasos adelante.